Hey folks, good evening. So, if you haven't heard, well, if you follow Cobra Press, you do. The Labyrinth is out, at least the PDFs, right? So the book's be coming soon. Hopefully, the modules, especially for Foundry, will be coming out in the next few months. There's a lot of Foundry updates that we need for Cobra Press, but I digress. Um, the Labyrinth is out, right? So what I wanted to do is I might go through different parts of the document over the next coming days and weeks or whatever, just for funsies. But what I was really want to do, and what I really want to try and have to wrap my own head around, and for anyone who sees this video, try to understand, you know, the the cosmology of the labyrinth, right? And that's what we want to focus on here. I have lots of excitement for both of these books. This is the cover of the World book, and you have the adventure book as well. There is, I think, a bunch of adventures in here. I didn't count, but it goes up to level 8, right? So there's probably like around 10 or 11 adventures. I forget the exact number, but that's a cool thing. I like that book. I like both of these covers. To be quite honest, I can't wait to have this nice art in my own hands. But I'm not really going to go through the adventure book. I mean, that's for DMs and stuff like that. That's not for today for sure. I want to go through parts of this. Like I said, we're all kind of used to. Zoop is grabbing something to this, right? And we all know what this is. There's been a form of this cosmology going all the way back to 1E, right? You have your prime material plane, you have your inner planes, you have your ethereal, which is, touching only the inner planes. You have your outer planes, which are roughly set up. I shouldn't say roughly. They're set up by alignment. Alignment doesn't exist anymore for most game systems. We can talk some of the time if that was a mistake or not. I contend it certainly was for monsters, but not for players. I think players trying to hold people to alignment is not the best concept. I don't think we did that much of it back in 1E when I played, but I love alignment for monsters because it gives you a general idea how the monster should behave, right? Um, doesn't mean you have to be held to it as a DM. I think getting rid of it for monsters is an overreaction. But off my thing. We're all set up with this. And what is, what does a labyrinth look like, right? Is it still following this? And the answer is generally no, right? So let's see what's different with this, see how Cold Press kind of blew this up, and what I'm basically going to do is show their picture of what they have, and then I'm just going to take different snippets out of the book and kind of like try and talk through what this new world looks like. The new world order, right? So the picture I'd like to show is this one, and I'll kind of blow this up a little bit. There we go. And we can see how close this is going to go with other. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Um, as you look at this, you see a whole bunch of worlds, and you see the word world dropped everywhere and not plain, right? You have what's called the core worlds. Um, you have your hells and your celestial worlds, which are basically your good and evil. I got thoughts on them too. You got your old ring. Uh, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you have this 10,000 worlds over here. You have your elemental planes, right? Earth, air, water, fire, which, it's situated this way. And, the water here feels like it's here by default, right? As we get into it, you can see why. I can see why our old ring would be near Earth. And I don't know how literal to take these these different elemental planes. I don't know if I take it quite as literally as this picture. You have your astral sea, and ethereal. We'll get to that. And then when you get down here, you have your void, right, touching down here, and what the heck is that? And we'll try to get to that a little bit as well. Um, One thing you don't see is you don't see obviously all those planes in the alignment wheel like you had before, right? They're gone, right? And that's probably okay, right? And depending how you want to interpret this, right? One thing you notice is missing is the abyss. We'll get back to that, right? Because that's probably the most popular plane that doesn't jump out and bite you from this picture. So let's get into this. Let's go into this. So I'm going to do a lot of talking, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Let me just kind of get here. So what do we see as I kind of get to the points here? Because this was just released a few hours ago, so I'm trying to like look at the book on my PDF and go back and forth to make sure I've got my head around this. So one thing, I kind of got out of the book just looking at it is lately I was actually in the middle of doing another video, which I actually recorded and will never see the light of day, where I looked up the preview to this book, and I was trying to rewrap my head around it. And as part of that, I was getting into the Midgard World book as well, because I was trying to pull together what was in the Midgard book to what was in this book that was up and coming, right? And the void, if it's mentioned at all in the World book, is not super prominent, right? I think there's snippets of it around different Global Press books, but not in great detail. I'm sure there's a paragraph in there. I don't recall exactly how much was there, but not. That's the point of this book that we bought, right? But you didn't have all the history. And I guess one thing that is mentioned that I see in the book, this is getting if you own the book, and I'm going to try and reference page numbers as I go along. For those people who own the book, you can look at that page and follow along, and then you can correct me if I screw up, right? And that's kind of the reason why I'm doing this. One thing I got off of page 8 of the book, and if you don't have it, go buy it, is the section Approach of the Void, which basically this is telling me that um, the feel I got from that paragraph is the void has really raised its ugly head recently, which is why you don't see it as prominently maybe in other Cold Press books, and it's coming now, right? It's kind of mentioned that in the Approach of the Void. There's another section in there that talks about Nidrog, and he seems like he's a bit more active lately. At least that's what I got out of that section. But at any rate, forces are moving, and the void is going to be more active. And I think that's the whole point of the adventure book, right? Is to delve into some of that. So as part of this, getting into page 9, the structure of the labyrinth itself, right? What is this thing? So basically, it talks a lot about, hey, it's tunnels and caverns and underground rivers and all kinds of different things that kind of like interconnect all these worlds, right? And it also talks about on that page that there's some bottle cities in there, which they're trying to come up with their own factions and because what I got out of this book from a quick read is it's the labyrinth versus the void, and all these worlds in this cosmology, they're stuck in the middle, right? That's what I get out of this, right? So the forces of people who are, we'll call it labyrinth savvy, and are working with the various people within the labyrinth, and then there's the people in the void they're doing this, and these worlds can get in the way, right? So that's what your campaign wants to be about. That's what I think this book is really going for, right? So you got to have some spots in the labyrinth where you have these communities. So there are some small demi-planes, cities in the bottle, they call it, whatever you want to call it, communities that are in the labyrinth. But most of the labyrinth is passageways and different connections between these lands, right? So when I think about these passageways and so forth, and we'll get to this as we get into some of the later chapters, you know, I picture it as Chronicles of Narnia, right? At least if you think of the first book of the Chronicles of Narnia, which probably most people have either read the book or maybe seen the movie, right? The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, right? They open up, the kids open up a wardrobe, and there's a passageway that takes you to Narnia, right? And the book talks about, at least, basically, and it's been years since I've read it, so forgive me. Um, but you open up the wardrobe, and the kids are kind of like going through what seems to be a wardrobe that is way too big, that has way too many coats, and then eventually it transforms into the snowy passage and takes you. Then you're in Narnia, right? And at least in my mind, that's what I think. That passageway, right, between the wardrobe and this other world is the labyrinth part, that connector, right? And these connectors, passageways, could be large or small, right? In this case, it was a small one connecting point A to point B, but you could very easily have more of a maze-like structure, and you can picture this connector to be bigger, that might take you into multiple worlds. On the extreme side, I think of, was it book 6? I don't remember. But the beginning of one of the books, I want to say book 6, it could have been book 5, right? If you're going by order of publishing, not by order of story order, right? So this is either the Magician's Nephew or A Horse and His Boy. It's one of those two, I believe. Or in the beginning of the book, this is more foggy to me, but I've used this in adventures long ago when I was doing 1E. There was a world that had, I think, different lakes or something like that, and each one of these was a portal to a different place, right? So you had this planar area where you would go into uh, one pond. It was like a pond-like thing, and when you dove into it and came out the other side of the pond, you were in some other location, right? It's been a long time. But again, I would almost picture that potentially as a part of the labyrinth, right? That's less maze-like in a sense. It's a lot of interconnecting, we'll say passageways, not passageways, but portals in one spot. But it wouldn't be much of a stretch. Excuse me, I switched legs here that I was sitting on. Uh, at my age, I shouldn't sit on my legs anymore. Um, but yeah, you could picture that as something labyrinth-like as well. So it's living inside those different connectors potentially. So that's how I look at it, um, and that would, I'm just looking through anything else I want to go into here. Probably not. Let's see. The book gets into this people and time, and we can talk about modes of travel, right? Which is on page 15 if you're following along. So modes of travel. With modes of travel, it talks about the passageway, roads, and tunnels, which I just kind of expounded that a few minutes ago with the whole Narnia setting in my head. Um, then they talk about oak roads. To be honest, this is something I kind of struggled um, with the world book, right? So they talk about these pathways on the world tree. So, to, getting into it, right? You see on this picture here, there's Yagercell, right? So this is the first world tree, right? But basically, there's many of these trees or branches of this tree that turn into trees, or however it works out, right? But basically, this world tree is connecting worlds, right? You got a bunch of worlds on here, right? And we'll get to it in a second, but think of even like the celestial worlds, the old ring, maybe even hell, like there's a connector there. These are all worlds. Don't think of them as planes in the 5e sense, right? So this world tree is basically tying into a lot of these different locations, right? It's kind of the umbrella that connects all of them potentially. And even the book talks about how you can use the world tree to connect, to travel to different places, right? So they're including these, what they're calling now, oak roads, as part of the labyrinth. So I had a hard time picturing this when I was prepping for the previous video and I was reading the Midgard guide. Like, okay, is this like a Jack and the Beanstalk thing when you're climbing up this? I guess potentially, or like sometimes it just talks about a route in a world, right? So I'm like, okay, well, if it's just a route and it's not going up through the sky, like, how am I picturing this connection, right? But I guess somehow this tree kind of has pathways in it as well in some way, shape, or form. And it allows you to travel down. So however you do it, but now it's called an oak road. I'll I'll work on it. It says the followers of the old ring know how to use the passageways, but they also know how to use the oak roads, the branches and pathways of the world tree. Okay, I'm still working on picturing that. I was kind of wondering if there was going to be a spell in this book that allows you to travel by tree. You know, I mean, druids kind of have that in 5e, so I'm not sure, but it feels like these are more um, roads in some way, shape, or form. So they're ambiguous enough that they're trying to leave it to our imagination. I would like to see it spelled out a bit more. But that's okay. We'll work on it. They also talk about the river Styx. You can see the river Styx is on this thing. That's also a part of the labyrinth, right? Basically, all different ways you can travel. So the river Styx, I can picture that easy. Chains of Asmodeus, for example, that used the river Styx, spoilers, in that particular book to travel between the nine hells, right? So, and that's not a big thing. I mean, you've read that in Dante's Inferno and other places as well. Not a hard concept to follow, right? So this river travels between places, sure, no worries, right? And even in 5e, right, the river Styx travels between the first plane of hell and the abyss, and that's where the blood war takes place, right? And then talk about the astral sea, and the astral sea is here. Later on, it does mention more about the ethereal plane. We'll get to that, but with the astral sea, I mean, it says, yeah, you can travel by astral sea. There's some really dangerous stuff there. You probably don't want to do it that way. There are better ways to do it. I.e., you bought this book, and there's a lot of labyrinth stuff in here, and we're not trying to tie in to old 5e stuff. But if you want it, it has to be here for backwards compatibility. So here's the astral sea. Maybe that's cynical me speaking there, but that's kind of how I took it, and the ethereal plane for that matter. But yes, it's here. You can use it, but there's no much focus on that, right? Safer ways to travel. Then, if you continue going on here in page 16, right, they talk about shortcuts within here. So they say, hey, there's gates and portals. You can dream your way through the labyrinth, through the dreaming god. And then there's void rifts, which is another, like, that's another kettle of fish that I need to read deeper into. But basically, I take it that, and the whole point, I think, of this is Kobold Press wants to make it really easy for you to move around, right? Which makes sense, right? Hey, bring your 5e characters in. Bring your, I don't know, Pathfinder people in. pull in Starfinder or whatever else you want, right? I mean, there's no limit here to your imagination. They're trying to make it so that if you have characters that you want to yank in here for one reason or another, here's your darn excuse. And here's all the different ways that you can write around doing it, right? With the biggest focus being the labyrinth and I think the portals and so forth, right? I mean, you even got the, when you look at the adventure book I sold, blah, saw, it's too late, saw earlier, right? That had a labyrinth looking picture on there. You didn't see the astral sea, you didn't see much of the way of dreaming or this or that. It's like, yeah, the passageways is the sexy thing. That's how I took it. Again, it's only been out for a few hours. People got to read this stuff. So yeah, so you have different ways of travel. That's how all this kind of pulls together so far. Let's talk about, at least briefly, I just want to make sure. Uh, I'm just going to jump here to Planes and Pathways, which is on page 24 for those following along. Right, so this is talking more about the worlds of the labyrinth. I'm not going to get into all these different, like, uh, worlds that are on here listed so far. There's a whole bunch of other ones that people have put in here. Some have been, uh, yeah, right, fan submissions, right? And it looks like Cobalt Press is trying to continue that. There's ways to submit your ideas going forward to something on their website. I have to read that email later. So they're trying to have literally fans come up with great ideas and give you a place to put them, right? Um, Again, on Planes and Pathways, it talks more about the Astral Sea. Uh, there's some stuff there that's really nasty. Please don't go there, right? They talk about the elemental spheres. So this is interesting where you have, earth, air, fire, water, right? And this was they're trying to give you some descriptions here of the elemental spheres, which have been done quite a bit, right, over the years. What I gathered from reading this, I don't notice tons of new concepts there, but like it feels when I read this that they're trying to make some of these planes, these elemental planes, a little bit more accessible, right? Like, like air and water, sure, like that's not a problem for a character most of the time, right? If you have airplane and you can fly or figure out some way of moving around in it, not easy enough place to adventure, right? But in the airplane, why would you have cities, right? Where did all that stone come from? This is the airplane, right? So, or in this case, the sphere, or air sphere, right? Um, with water, same idea, right? You're in the water plane. Why would you have Earth there to build structures, right? But you can easily enough travel around there. Even with Earth and fire, it's a little bit more tricky. Where like in Earth, why would you have air in the Earth plane, right? So in 5e land, you know, now Cobalt Press, they're telling you, yeah, that's not a problem, right? When we mean it's the Earth plane, it's the mostly Earth plane. You can have air in there, and you don't necessarily need a dig spell or a dig speed um, to move around in it, right? Like even here, it talks about subterranean mountain ranges, ravines, twisting tunnels. So if there's tunnels, that means there's air, right? So you know, I think Cobalt Press trying to write this in a way that fire is mostly fire. Those ways to get around there that doesn't require you know walking through fire type of thing. Like if you read the original 1E stuff, earlier D&D stuff, for example, like you would get the earth and say air would be like pure earth, pure air, and then when those planes came to a spot where they might be closer together, maybe there was a portal there or whatever, then these elements might mix a bit, and that would be a little more easier for adventuring. Whereas if you were away from that, especially with the earth plane, that would and I'll keep calling it plane. I'll eventually switch to sphere, I suppose. But yeah, um, that was harder to travel through. With this, it sounds like they're trying to be a bit more of a mix. So you could go there if you needed to and not have to worry about, will I die as soon as I walk on the spot, right? The other thing that I took out of this is, and this is a kind of a key one. So, and there's a couple of places this is mentioned when you pull it together, but page 27, they talk about the ethereal plane. And one thing I got out of this with the ethereal plane, and I didn't read through all of this, but everything you see here on this map, especially the worlds, maybe not so much the spheres of earth, air, fire, water, but the spheres, the hells, celestial worlds, old ring, etc. These are all in the prime material plane. Okay, these are not inner outer planes like the 5e sets, and I'll find the reference for that eventually, but it's called out like that. So the ethereal plane does touch, say, the hells and the celestial worlds. That would have not have been true for 5e or previous versions of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So while I would say the ethereal plane is now pretty, again, pushed to the side, we're keeping it here because we need backwards compatibility with 5e, and there's phase spiders and other interesting ethereal spells. So we're not going to totally kick it to the curb, but yeah, not much is here. It's there if you need it. Sure. Yeah. All right. So getting past that, right? I was trying to find where that mention of the ethereal touching all these planes, or I think it's later on, but I'll find it. Yeah, it will talk more from there. The next thing I wanted to go to, let's go to boop. No, I don't want to go there. Let's go to. I want to go to the void. Probably is coming up next. So, do I want to be here or there? I think I want to be here. So I'm just kind of going through this, trying to find where I lost this one spot, but that's okay. So let's talk about the void down here. And I can see if I find the references. So one interesting thing on page 56 now is that the void is basically devours worlds, right? So we as people in the labyrinth are the protectors of these worlds in a sense, right? And I guess it depends on what faction you belong to. I didn't go into factions here, but that's the theme that we're talking about, right? The void is part of the weird power source. So this can get really sexy, right? Is that with the void, right? There is your weird power source is going to be your void magic, potentially, right? That's what I'm getting out of all this, right? So when we get the Player's Guide 2, maybe in January, right, when we get our first full spellcaster with the witch being a weird full caster, she's going to have a lot of void stuff going on between what you get in this book and probably the PG3 too. So yeah, so that's an interesting thing that weird is pulling part of its energy from the void. So cool, I like it. The also thing they talk about here is the near void versus the deep void, and this is on page. What is some on 57? One thing you notice when you're reading about this, right, is that when you see them talking about the void, you hear the word demons passed around a lot. There are cultists, demons, and other funky things, right? Apparitions, undead, all this kind of stuff, right? When you look at, I think it's on this next page. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And I guess this is saying here, like on page 58, demons in the void, right? So this is it talks more about, how it talks about demons lords reigning in the hells, and the abyssal depths of the void are where fiends known as demons were first spawned, and many still dwell. So I'm still trying to find the one blurb. I didn't write it down, but basically what it comes down to is the worlds. There's a near void and the deep void. And what it comes down to is when you look here at these worlds that have been corrupted by the void, that seems to be what is the abyss, right? Up here it is here. It's actually on page 58, right? Where it says dead worlds and the near void. So the region of the void closest to the labyrinth is also referred to as the abyss. So there isn't like an abyss world or 666 abyss worlds like there is in Dungeons and Dragons. Right here, they're saying that these worlds that are corrupted are the abyss, and the abyss is potentially expanding, right? So when the void is corrupting another world on the labyrinth, that is the abyss expanding. So it's also leaving you it out there, like if you wanted to have Demigorgon or something like that. I guess they're saying they could potentially be in the hells, or you could just give it a void world. I don't know, right? I guess as you as a DM GM can do whatever you want, right? But yeah, so what we're having here is an abyss that is trying to expand, and I guess the dark void, deep void. The deep void is expanding the abyss. These worlds. Cool concept. I like it. So so that's something that we're going to have to deal with. I also want I think that's about all I wanted to go through there, and I think that's most of it, right? I'm trying to find. So it does talk about the deep void in 61, and there's page 61, and there's other pages which talk about the effects of being in the deep void. I'm going to definitely take some time to digest that a bit, and either do another video or do whatever. But yeah, the deep void is this area here. That's an either scarier part of the abyss, if there is such a thing, right? Where all things are just going sideways, right? And to be honest, I mean, I kind of like that concept, right? I like the concept of this deep void, and these planes not being static, right? So from there, really, I mean, the rest of the book talks about the factions of the void, um, the heroes of the void. I'm not going to go through and go through all that. I will say there's plenty of class options here. There is a bit of a scatter of different things that are void related. As you would expect, there are 3 new subclasses for Warlock, right? Which makes sense since the void is magic, or void is part of where weird power sources get their power from. So having a bunch more warlocks coming from the void makes sense. There was a wizard void caster. Um, that like, I'm already excited for that. There's my next wizard, man. Give me some more void spells and that wizard, and that is definitely the next one I want to spin up. I am psyched for that one. Um, and then the spells, right? And this is some side things. This is obviously past the whole architecture thing. They did come up with a number of spells. I'm still going through it. There is some. One of my prior videos, I was going on my rant about more voids, more weird spells. Um, I guess they're going to come in Player's Handbook 2. Oh, excuse me, Player's Guide 2. Sorry about that, slip of the tongue. And that's fine, right? But there's a few in here that are unique. A lot of them are still arcane spells, which, I want more. And the primordial ones is pretty thin. So I'd like to see more primordial. I'd like to see uh, more weird, and that's still there for me for sure. I'd like to see weird primordial spells as opposed to arcane primordial weird spells. Like, okay, enough of the arcane. Like, figure out some way to make a dividing line. So at that point, I think that's most things I want to go through already. I'm already a half hour in. It kind of touches everything I wanted to touch. Um, and yeah, so I mean, this is just definitely a neat concept. It's definitely different than what we used to in 5e. Um, there's a lot of things to go through in this book, and there'll be other videos I'm sure other people will put out. I'll put out trying to digest this and understand it all. But this is what I've got at it so far, and this is what really interested me the most: is how is this going to be different? Which, in the end, the whole inner outer plane thing has blown up. If you want to keep some of those planes from 5e, make them part of the 10,000 worlds. And in the book it says that you can. I guess I saw it also in the preview that these are more worlds now, not infinite planes, which is also a little different than 5e. Which to make sense. I mean, anytime I saw one of those planes, whether it was a plane from hell or somewhere else, they didn't really look like infinite planes. You have a finite book that you're drawing a map on. They show you all the key spots, and if the plane goes on for infinity and it's not a key spot, who cares about it, right? So the fact that they make it more of a world, so there's finite edges, sure, why not, right? So I didn't really talk too much about the old ring. Um, that's fine. That might be something for another time. That doesn't really get into the structure per se. Um, and that's good. And some of this is in the Midgard books, so you really have to especially the Yggdrasil stuff and stuff like that. So it's really bouncing between different books to get to where you want. All right, that's it. I can think of subjects off the fly, but I think that's for another time. Um, you have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. My mouse is lost. There it is.